Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Governor Andrew Cuomo issued thousands of pardons recently. 77 of them are said to have been sex offenders. That has Congressman Tom Reed concerned that these sex offenders will be going into schools near children. Here's what Reed said yesterday.
This week I wanted to highlight legislation we are in the process of drafting in direct response to the extreme radical policy that Governor Cuomo issued out of Albany, where he essentially pardoned 24,000 convicted felons, is my understanding. But most importantly, he allowed and supported sex offenders having the ability to vote in our school setting. There are 77 known convicted sex offenders that will now have access to schools in order to vote. And I believe holding these individuals fully accountable for their bad deeds is the right thing to do. And most importantly, this legislation would prevent sex offenders, such as those 77 pardoned and supported by Governor Cuomo, from having the ability to vote in our school setting. This is an example of an extremist policy on the left that is very dangerous on top of its radical extreme nature, but dangerous for those kids that are going to be exposed to these sex offenders when they're exercising what has been restored to these sex offenders by the extreme policies out of Albany, the right to vote in our school setting. Remember, these are convicted sexual offenders that would have access to school facilities in order to vote. And I don't think it's fair or right or good policy to allow those sex offenders to come in contact with children as they are attending school. So for that reason, we are looking at legislation at the federal level to make it very clear that we do not stand with convicted sex offenders. And for the extremists out of Albany to stand with sex offenders is something they may want to do, but we are going to call out extremist policies that are putting our children at risk and do what we can at the federal level to make sure that those sex offenders cannot be a risk to our children in our communities. So I just wanted to make folks aware of our efforts here, and we'll keep you apprised as we move forward. Now, with that, let's open it up to some questions.
The first question came from WDOE Dunkirk.
This is Greg Larson in for Dave Raleigh today. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing well, Greg. How you doing?
Doing good this afternoon.
Great day over there for you.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a local issue there. As you were kind of alluding to there, the National Comedy Center down in Jamestown having its grand opening today with several officials in attendance. And I know you couldn't be there, but give us a comment on the opening of this center that took 3 years to finally open.
Well, absolutely a great day for the community in regards to National Comedy Center becoming a reality with the ribbon cutting that was there today. I know our office was in attendance, and we were on the other side of the district today, but wanted to send a message that we so appreciate the hard work of the community leaders that had the vision and the fortitude to see this National Comedy Center become a reality. As we speak, we're waiting for the national designation to come through the legislative process. I'm very optimistic that will occur here very shortly. But overall, this is just yet another example. We don't care in our office who gets credit for getting things done, so long as it gets done. And kudos to our local officials, our state officials, and our fellow federal officials for standing together to have such a great gem as the National Comedy Center come to a reality, as you saw today.
On the Congressman Tom Reed Weekly Press Call, next question came from Jamestown radio reporter Terry Frank.
Yes. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Terry. How are you?
I'm good. Greg kind of took my thunder there as far as the National Comedy Center. I did want to ask a little bit about this legislation you talked about at the onset. With regards to introducing this, are you doing this in conjunction with anybody else there in Congress? Where is this at this point?
Yeah, right now it's in the drafting phase, so we're reaching out to others for co-support of it. And what we want to do is make sure, because obviously we're talking federal legislation, there are some issues that need to be ironed out as to how to make it effective at the school district level. And one of the things we're looking at is tying it to federal funding. So if school receives federal funding, that a convicted sex offender would not be able to access the property of that school, regardless of how it was handled at the state level in regards to that conviction. So there are some technical issues that are in the process of being drafted, but bottom line, I want to send a message here as soon as I possibly can that these extremist policies that are standing with sex offenders that put our children at risk is something we're going to call out and say that is not right to do, and we're going to make sure that the safety of our children are protected.
I wanted to shift to a different topic real quick. I know that earlier today, and it's been on the news already, about the president tweeting that Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop, quote, this rigged witch hunt right now, referring to the Russia investigation. I wanted to get your thoughts about it because I know that Mayor Giuliani, who is representing the president, said that he said should, not must. Your thoughts? Yeah,
I believe this is an expression of the president's opinion on the matter in regards to the investigation. And we've weighed in. I think after a year and a half, the investigation needs to show what it has done, what it has found, and wrap up its investigation in order to let the evidence come out to the American people as to whether or not there is collusion in the election process of 2016. And so I think the president shares that sentiment that let's wrap this up, let's get to the facts, let the evidence come out, and if there's anything there, let the American people see it. And that, I think, is a fair assessment of where we stand at this juncture of this investigation after years and millions of dollars of taxpayer money. It's time to see where this is at and have it come to a conclusion and us start moving forward to deal with the people's problems.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Yep, thank you.
It's the Congressman Tom Reed Weekly Press Call. The next question came from us here at WLEA.
Hello, Brian.
Was wondering, do you know if any of the convicted sex offenders who have been pardoned are in this congressional district?
We're still tracking down as much as we possibly can. We do know there are 77 convicted sex offenders that would have access to school grounds in order to vote. And to me, that's just too large of a risk that this extreme policy coming out of Albany is trying to, that would be created by this policy. So from my perspective, when you have extreme policy, radical policy such as this, putting our children at risk, we're going to call it out, and we're going to do what we can at the federal level to make sure that our schools are safe and sound.
Next up on the press call, Rick Miller from the Olean Times-Herald, who really went into almost debate mode with the congressman on this one.
Do you know how many times you said extreme during this press conference?
Yeah, because I will tell you, that's exactly what we're calling it out to be, Rick. I mean, when you have extreme policies such as this that are standing with the side of sex offenders, I will call it what it is, extremism. And that is dangerous when it comes to our kids. And so I'm not going to shy away from that message in that this is an extreme policy coming out of Albany that has to be called out and that we're going to stand up and fight against.
And the other question I had, when you mentioned that it's time to wrap up Mueller's investigation, he's indicted like 21 Russians in the investigation. There have been several guilty pleas in the investigation, and it's why do we want to hurry this up? Don't we want to get to the truth?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you've got to remember what the charge of the investigation was, is to identify collusion by Americans that assisted Russians in meddling with and trying to influence our election process of 2016. These incidental convictions and guilty pleas are unrelated matters to that charge and of the investigation. And when you have a year and a half, and we're coming up on an additional election cycle, I think it's prudent. If there's evidence of wrongdoing here, we need to get it out. We need to wrap it up, and we need to learn from it to make sure that our 2018 election process is as safe and secure as possible from any potential threats that the investigation would identify. But there's been no evidence of collusion. There's been no evidence or related matters related to the fundamental question of collusion, and I think it's appropriate after a year and a half and millions of dollars to start asking the questions to Mr. Mueller, let's see what you got. Let's wrap it up, and let's move on to other issues.
Facebook just yesterday disclosed what it had said was a bid to impact the 2018 elections. They didn't say that it involved Russia, but it seems they have Russian fingerprints on it. Don't we have to follow this to the end, Tom?
Yeah, well, if Mueller wants to investigate Russians, and that's a special investigation committee that he wants to ask for authority and review, that's something maybe he can pursue. But what he was charged with is to look at President Trump and see if there was collusion between the president and the Russians on the election. And at some point in time, investigations have to come to an end. They cannot just be standing committees that investigate every nook and cranny of any and all matter that is indirectly related to it. And so, that there are processes in place. There are other offices that can address the issue of Russia meddling. But at the end of the day, this investigation, in regards to this specific charge in which the investigation was established, needs to get to its conclusion on that question.
But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, every day of Russian collusion and meddling. And
No. Russian meddling and collusion are two separate things, Rick. And there's been no evidence of collusion in regards to collusion between Trump campaign, Trump organization, and the Russians. And that's what this investigation was charged with. Now, if we want to go into Russian meddling and you want to get into other issues, that's an appropriate question. But for this investigation, you just can't leave an investigation go open-ended and spend hours upon days upon years upon millions of dollars to just continue without reaching any type of conclusions.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So that's that for the Congressman Tom Reed Weekly Press Call. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, it'll be Senator Gillibrand and her press call from this week. Stay with us here on Newsmaker.
You take flooring for granted, don't you? I mean, if you think about how much wear and tear you put that floor through, why would you even think about buying a cheap floor when you need one? Buy quality flooring from Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering in Almond. Mullins buys in bulk, and that means you save money on quality flooring. They even offer 0% interest for qualified buyers. Shop over 400,000 square feet of major name brand in-stock flooring. And get it installed now. And no box store wait. Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering in Almond. Let them floor you.
Our summer sizzler is here. Every week, we'll be picking one winner from each of our local sponsors to win a family 4-pack of theme park tickets. 4 tickets to Waldamer Water Park, Darien Lake Theme Park, Roseland Water Park, Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame, or Martin's Fantasy Island. Register at these great local businesses. In Canisteo, J&J Barbecue and Sausage Company, the Hartman Agency, Annie's Restaurant, and BK's Boutique Florist. In Hornell, register at K&K Auto and Hornell Gardens. Also, at Studio 12 in Arkport, Perks Auto in Almond, Duke's Pizza in Alfred, and Way to Grow and Canagadia Country Store in Alfred Station. Good luck from AM 1480 WLEA and Fun 92.1.
Now we're on with meteorologist Rob Carroll, who today is going to give us not just the forecast for today, tomorrow, and the next day, but to talk a little bit about the nationwide weather trends.
Sure, Brian. It looks like we're in for more of this moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. Satellite photos this morning continue to show a train of moisture working its way from the Gulf across the Florida Panhandle and directly into western and central New York. That's why it continues to be so humid out there. Looking at the dew point temperatures this morning, a lot of us around 65 degrees. That's moderate to high humidity. To our east, it's even worse. Down around the city, they've got dew points in the 70s. That's oppressively humid, and that air is going to continue to stream up through New England. Tracking some rain this morning. Right now, most of it stretching from just around the Finger Lakes area to about Binghamton, then down to the Gulf of Mexico. To our south, there's actually some flash flood watches up. I think we'll see scattered showers and storms today, 75 to 80. Sun will peek out now and again. Mostly cloudy overnight, 65 to 70. For tomorrow, it looks like a good deal of cloudiness. Maybe a shower or a thunderstorm in the afternoon, 80 to 85. Tomorrow night, partly to mostly cloudy, 65. And then Saturday, we start to get rid of the humidity. That allows for a partly sunny day, 80 to 85. Sunday looks partly sunny, warm, 85 to 90. Now that we're into the month of August, Brian, we're going to take a look back at what went on during the month of July. July. Temperature across the country, well, it was pretty warm. It was the 8th warmest July on record. But the interesting thing is the month was kind of skewed. We had record heat across portions of the eastern United States during the first week of the month. That actually pulled our temperatures above normal. Generally from Maine across New York on into northern Pennsylvania, we were looking at more than normal temperatures. But the rain that they've had, mid-Atlantic states into northern Florida, kept temperatures below normal there, below normal in the central United States. And the big problem, we've seen the result with the fires in the western part of the United States, the record heat across California and parts of the Pacific Northwest. That really has set the fire season off in California to a very vigorous and early start. The worst of it is usually during September and October. Here it is July, and they've been fighting up to 20 wildfires over the state. Precipitation-wise, we were also looking at a lot of precipitation in the eastern United States with that flow out of the Gulf of Mexico. That looks like it's going to have the tendency to continue as we head through the next couple of days, but hopefully drier weather develops by the weekend.
Back on Newsmaker, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand had a press conference the other day about legislation that she's trying to keep in the budget that revitalizes old buildings and downtowns.
Wherever I go in our state, one thing that always impresses me so much is how determined our communities are to bring back jobs and breathe new life into the economy. I want to talk to you about one way I'm fighting in the Senate to help our local communities get that done. In New York State, we are blessed with some of the most beautiful buildings and landmarks in the whole country. We have stunning old train stations and factories and warehouses that were built by some of the most talented workers in the world. Unfortunately, in downtowns and main streets all over New York, many of these buildings aren't being used anymore. Many of them are abandoned and some are in disrepair. These old buildings have so much potential. They could be an anchor for all kinds of economic revitalization projects. Imagine if, instead of just sitting there empty, they were turned into new museums, new stores, new theaters, new event spaces. The good news is there's actually a great federal program that can help our state make that happen. It's called the Historic Preservation Fund, and it has already brought billions of dollars in investments to communities all over the country, including many in New York. I'll give you a couple of examples. In Buffalo, this program was used to convert an old warehouse into student housing for Erie Community College. In Ithaca, it was used to turn a vacant building into a new restaurant and affordable housing. And in Albany, the program was used to turn a vacant building into an Irish-American Heritage Museum. So this is a very good program, and it's effective. But unfortunately, when President Trump released his budget for next year, he tried to make a massive cut to funding. That would have a huge impact on our state, and it would be a mistake because it would have hurt communities all over New York that rely on those funds. So I worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to convince the Senate Appropriations Committee to disregard the president's demand to cut this program. And they listened. They agreed not to cut it. That was a big win for our state, but we still need to do a lot more. So today, I'm very proud to announce that I'm introducing a bipartisan amendment in the Senate that would increase funding for the Historic Preservation Fund for communities all over New York. My amendment is being considered on the floor now to amend the Department of Interior Appropriations Bill. And my co-sponsor is Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana. Our bipartisan amendment would increase funding for historic preservation to $96.91 million. This is a much higher number than what was requested by President Trump in his budget, because our communities have shown that when they get this investment, they use it well, and it attracts huge amounts of private investment, and it ends up bringing in tourists and ends up creating jobs. Communities all over New York are working hard to turn their economics around, and the Historic Preservation Fund is a great tool to help them do it. So I'm going to fight hard and pass this bipartisan amendment, and I urge all New Yorkers who care about our economy to join me in raising their voices about it. Thanks so much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Abe Kenmore from the Watertown Daily Times. Senator, you mentioned a couple projects around the state. Do you know of any projects up in northern New York that have received this funding offhand?
Yeah, definitely have gotten money. We'll give you the specifics of where and when.
Great.
But I've been to a couple of museums that I would be surprised if they got some money, so we'll get back to you on that.
Great, thank you.
Any other on-topic questions? Okay. Do we have any off-topic questions?
I saw the press release on airport funding today. I assume that's FAA grants.
The airport funding today was FAA grants.
Okay, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of that.
Oh, so huge. So a lot of our airports around the state really depend on FAA grant money. We have regional airports that desperately need support because they just don't have as many riders, and they can't necessarily support all the routes that are really important for their constituencies. So getting money to make sure regional airports get access to money is really important, especially for more remote access places in our state, whether you're talking about the North Country or parts of the Southern Tier or Western New York. It really does matter. So we want to make sure we can have regional airports, too.
Thank
Anything
you.
else about FAA money?
So that was that for that press call with U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Our thanks to everyone for listening. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. The Brian Kilmeade Show is next.